Welcome to another week of Salt Shaker Conversations brought to you by the Jones Girl Inc. And Salt Shaker Conversation is simply a conversation with the Jones Girls that allow authenticity, transparency, and empowerment through dialogue. So I am Kiara Jones.
I am Crystal Jones, Walton III.
Dr. Carmen Jones Harris.
Dr. Edna Jones Miller.
Today we're going to be talking about mental health. Now this is a very popular topic. I wanted to talk about it even from, we've talked about us being people of faith, how those things align, mental health and being faith-based. And Crystal is actually going to be leading the discussion on this because this is something that she's studying in depth. So go ahead and take it away
And help us understand.
help us understand, honey.
Help us.
What do you want to know?
You know what? One of the things,
Yeah.
because we're people of faith, right?
Yeah.
And so when mental health started to kind of be the topic or whatever, my mom was alive. And so mama just say, them just demons, them just, you know
And
what I'm
it could
saying?
be, yeah, it
And
could
everybody
be.
got demons. And, what you sitting there going to the therapist for, you need Jesus, all that, right? But is it possible to be a person of faith, still be able to do proper mental health assessments, and what does that look like? Help me with that. I don't know if that question makes sense.
And when you answer, if I do get the support,
Yeah.
does that mean I'm lacking faith?
Right. That's a good one too. So
Very good question.
Write that down so you answer all of them.
yeah.
Right. If I
Your
don't,
mind, Jer.
hold me to the fire. Hold me to the fire.
Uh-huh.
So first and foremost, you said, do you? No, because that last one was so good.
Yeah.
Okay, say it again.
I was
Yeah,
just talking
yeah,
about the balance between the two. When we
Okay.
talk about, mental health, we kind of grew up with, them demons.
Okay.
Right? And
Yeah.
so we don't have room to
Yeah.
be talking to no therapist because you need
So
a
what's the
friend.
question? What's
Right.
the question?
That's, how does it align with faith? How does the mental health assessment align with faith? That's my question. Sorry.
Well, first and foremost, our soul is our mental health. Scripture speaks a lot about the soul of the man, so that incorporates the heart, the mind, and a lot of times our behavior flows from that, right? You feel something, you act from it. You're stressed out, you flip out, right? So typically, a person who needs support in any aspect of their soul or mental health, it comes from the need of maybe their bio, psycho, or social lacking. And when I say bio, psycho, social, I say bio short for biology or biological aspect of you, psycho, which is psychological part of you, and then social, that is social things that are lacking. And so that's the three parts that the soul really focuses on. So for the believer, we take it a step further with mental health and mental health counseling. So it's the bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. And so for the believer, we know that we are three parts interconnected. So we are body, soul, and spirit. So for you to first understand what needs help, you have to decipher where am I lacking. And so if you're lacking, I think one of the examples we gave off camera was a family member who probably was diagnosed with something. And so the question was, is that true? And my answer was, it depends. Right? And you hate when professionals do that way, it depends. Because there's so much research involved. But in reality, it is, I have to go through the biopsychosocial assessment. And then as a Christian therapist, I look at your spirit. And so there's a good example of this actually with the man in the tomb.
Okay.
I talk about this all the time. And he is a person who had an encounter with Jesus, what I say from the rooter to the tutor. But he really shows your three-part and how it's connected when Jesus comes on the scene. And initially, he's possessed. Like we know he's possessed spiritually. He's full of what you would call demons, right? And so Jesus comes along, he casts the demons out. But then there's a part after that. Jesus don't cast the demons out and he go away. He sit and he says, He sat at his feet and was clothed in his right mind. Wait, so what do you mean? His spirit is not perfect, right? But there's something missing that he's got at the feet of Jesus. What was that? His soul care.
That's so good.
And so when we hear the word soul, or we hear the word counseling, or we hear that, anytime you think of counseling for the Christian, we are looking for our whole entire man to be healed.
That's good. That's good.
That is, and I want to, and while you're saying that, 1 Thessalonians 5:23, we'll let this
Yes.
be the backdrop,
Yeah.
because we would read this every single week when we
Yes.
were doing, the women's Bible study, and we would pray this over the women every week. And it says, now may the God of peace and harmony set you apart and make you completely holy, and may your entire being, spirit, soul, and body
Three
be
parts.
kept completely flawless at the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Anointed One. And so I think in especially in faith, we got spirit down. We have mastered spirit.
Yes.
We can speak in tongue and break up the Hebrew, Greek. We gonna run rhyme. We gonna exegete. We gonna, hook and buck. We got that.
Not hook and buck.
Yeah, we gonna hook and buck. We got that. But we have really
Right.
neglected
Yes.
the part of our makeup
Yes.
that is the soul.
Yes.
And we have kind of grouped it all together into one thing when it's really not. And I think because it has gone, without care,
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
being, maintained
Yes.
properly, the way
Yes.
God wants us to maintain it,
Yes.
we'll start to equate it to say that faith don't work. And no, and that's not it. It's just that you have not separated
Yeah.
the three parts.
Yeah, and
right?
then overall arching theme is we've dehumanized ourselves.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm a spirit. I don't need that other stuff. But you need your body and your mind to function.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yes.
if you're not functioning wholly and from a healed place, you're a tyrant a lot of times. You have these disorders, you have dysfunctional relationships, you have conditions, right, that you need help with. And a lot of times we don't pay attention to our brains.
Right.
It is an organ just like our heart, just like our kidneys. And so it's just like, you will take medicine for all those major organs. Why won't you take it for
Right.
the mainframe?
You make me think about the stigma that's associated. Because even as you're sitting talking, right, as you just said that, I'm going, that ain't me. And I'm picturing an extreme case of someone who is run out of the office, strip their clothes off, running down the street screaming,
Yeah.
right? And the police are surrounding them, and the immediate thing, we're like, And so
wrong.
how do we move from that image
Yeah.
to Samantha, who is married with 3 kids,
Yeah.
is working a full-time job. She takes care of her family. She's married. She attends, is a part of her faith-based community, but has internal woes and angst
Yes.
that she is not expressing. And when she goes to church, they tell her just pray about it. And we know prayer's the answer,
Yeah.
right? But they
It
tell her,
is.
you ain't praying hard enough.
Prayer
You got to fast.
without work.
But I'm
is
fasting too.
dead.
That's some more work.
Yeah.
That's some more work. So what do we say when we talk about mental health,
Yeah.
support, advocacy,
Yes.
and just removing the stigma? What do we say to that person? Because
Yes.
a lot of the people that will probably listen may not be that man running down the street with no clothes. It's people that are living everyday life
Yes.
that are sometimes having challenges
Course.
communicating or getting support
Course.
with those particular areas.
Of course. First and foremost, I have to recognize that the masses' viewpoint is based off of Hollywood. That's Hollywood. That is an exaggerated depiction of mental health or a psychotic break. That is what we call abnormal psychology. That is not the norm when it comes to mental health. The norm is the person you just told me about. She may have postpartum. She may just have a bunch of stressors, and she don't have the coping skills that her family taught her. So she's having a hard time managing everything. And so that is our everyday person who's like, I just walked out on my marriage because I couldn't take it. And it's just like, okay, understandable. That's a regular life transition. That's a regular thing. And if you think about a lot of times with women, we really do focus on our biopsychosocial because we are hormonal, right? Everything functions from there. And if that's off, picture what else is off.
Right.
And so for that individual who probably ran out, flipped out, we have processes for those people, but that's not the norm. And so I would have to acknowledge that's not our norm, that's TV. And when it is shown in media, it's sensationalized oftentimes. And so our average person have average problems. And we're there to equip you with practical wisdom, right, and practical counsel that we've acquired practically. And so for the believer who feels or says, I don't have that problem, we all have stress. We all have stressors.
So are you saying, and I'm gonna let you, because I'm just asking you questions
Yes.
to kind of, so I wouldn't need to be diagnosed with like a mental health disorder to see a therapist.
Absolutely not.
So I can just,
Absolutely not.
as a place of self-care, as a place of healthy wholeness, participate in those conversations.
Yes.
What would those conversations be like?
Preventive care. So just like you do health with anything else, you can come into therapy is based off of your own availability, your own how much work you want to do. We're not doing the work. We're coming alongside you to aid you and assist you in that work. So if a person is saying, hey, listen, I'm just coming in, I don't really think I had no problem. Why are you here? Why are you here? Because in reality, we all have our limitations. Some people are just brave enough to acknowledge those limitations and get help. They're humble enough to acknowledge those limitations and get help because we all need it. And so what counseling in essence will do, we can give you a short-term plan or we can give you a long-term plan depending on you and your goals. And so we set up a plan that way. But I think when a person comes in, statistically and typically it's during a crisis. They've gotten so far out of their relationship or their health or something to their like, come in and fix me. And it's just like, okay.
The house already burning.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's stop the fire, right? And then we have to rebuild now. And so we're going to give you the tools to rebuild. Or if it's something biological, we have to assess you. Like we ain't just gonna give you, like we wouldn't just give you we wouldn't just give you something because we have a license. We have laws we have to follow. So it's with that we're advocating for you but with ourselves and for ourselves
So my
as well.
question for you is the downward spiral. Like how, so you just talked about how a person comes when the house is on fire.
Correct.
And so as you were talking about this idea of things that are normal, I thought about, I saw a Facebook post the other day and it was like a woman that had a black eye and she was beat all up and she was all disheveled and it was like, this is me trying to take enough water, keep my weight down, take care of the kids, do all of this, and still be happy and have money in my bank account, kind of thing.
Right.
And you all beat up.
Yeah.
And so how do that was the picture. So how does a person recognize before the house is on fire when they need to say something's not right? Is it that point where you're trying to keep up with all these things and I just need to talk to somebody to figure out, or how does a person recognize
I
that?
think one of the things you said just now was humility. When you said you got to be humble enough to admit
I'm
that you need
overwhelmed.
that. Yeah. and
But I
sometimes
don't.
it's-
I have all of these roles, but I don't have the coping skills, or I don't have the skills. I have all of these roles, but I don't know where to start. I'm disorganized. I'm overwhelmed, and typically, that's when people come in.
But I will say this, so I use myself, I think it was maybe 2 years or 3 years ago. I was running a school, didn't have like help in the size of the school. I'm doing that. My husband was like just starting the business. Like we got all these things happening. I'm taking the kids in 5 different places. And I remember, and I think I called you that day. I was like, man, my chest hurt. And I kept going like it was right here. I was like, what is that? But I'm going. I'm going to go. And I remember walking into my then boss. I said, hey, my chest hurting. I'm going to go home. And she was like, go to the hospital, you could be dying. And I was just like, whatever. So I called, hey, my chest hurting, y'all got an appointment. And then they say, go to the hospital, you may be dying. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm not dying. So I go to the hospital, they have to run all the tests, and they're like, you're in perfect health. You're in perfect, there's nothing wrong, like you're perfect from top to bottom. They did say I needed to lose a couple pounds. But, I mean, no judgment, but, you're in perfect health. And so so I had to then go and see my primary. And so I go to my primary, and she says, well, I mean, I'm going to prescribe you, I think it was Prozac? Is it? So she's like, and I was like, nah, friend, I ain't taking that. And she's like, no, this is because there's nothing wrong, so it has to be psychological. And I remember saying to her, I said, I refuse. Well, and this is not an anti-medication conversation. Some people need it. I just recognized my point in that moment, and I said to her, I said, I will never allow anything to push me to the place where I'm so out of whack that I can't see. So instead of I didn't take any Prozac. And so I said, well, what's a natural supplement? She says ashwagandha, right? If you're familiar with ashwagandha, it's a natural herb, it's a calming whatever. No, it's all natural though.
Okay.
And so I
It's
go and buy it.
Weed.
Oh, it is. I never took it though, honey. I went and bought it. And I didn't take it. But that was my moment for me. And I remember going into prayer because the first piece is to acknowledge, because we keep talking about owning and recognizing.
Right.
And I said, Lord, I've bitten off more than I can chew.
There you go.
And I said, I will never
There you go.
in my life, I'll never again move to a place where I can't hear you. And so I stopped and I said, okay, what part is out of whack? Because I couldn't tell. That's why. That's why I'm saying that, because sometimes you can't tell. I was like, I'm normal. Like I got kids. I'm going to church.
So
normal.
we have this theory. Let me just call it a theory that your body has a memory. In other words, your body speaks. It sends command system.
Yes.
That was a command.
Yes.
Something got to change. So even in that individual, something has to change. You were cognizant and aware enough that something had to change. You was like, wait, stop, right? Sometimes people aren't aware enough to know that something has to change. Now, this is what I love about God, because he considers all things, he does all things well. He calls his son the Wonderful Counselor.
Yes.
And I say he is by far the biggest interventionist in the world because he snatched all of us from hell. Don't missteward his work.
Yeah.
You are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. What is that good work for you? If we are overwhelming ourselves, we're not being good stewards of the masterpiece that he saved. And so moving forward as believers, it's all in his book. It's like, be led by the Spirit of God. I heard this wonderful pastor say, walk at the pace of grace. Be moved by the Spirit. And so with that, it is, should I go here? Should I go there? And mentally, like I said, we assess all different things. It's not just your mind. It's your emotions. It's your relationships. That's why marriage counseling is huge. Because it's like you bring all of who you are into this place, into this sanctity of marriage, and you're messing it up. And you're like, but I don't know what to do. Okay, great. I know. Welcome. And so it is those shortcomings, or we call it weaknesses or sin, right? That we then analyze to see and like, oh, okay, you just need help here and you need a safe space to do it on your own terms in a loving atmosphere where you're safe. I'm advocating for you and I'm protecting me as well as you. Feel free. And so the reality is mental health examines the emotional, the psychological, and the relational / behaviors. And so when we look at something It's a little off. There's an illness. There's a disorder. There's dysfunction. It's like, hey, we can tweak it. We can be better. And it's just taking the time out for that soul care. Like the man who sat at Jesus' feet and was just like, when Jesus got ready to leave after he was clothed in his right mind, he didn't want Jesus to leave. And so it's like, hey, there are some people equipped with that same gifting to where they be like, no, you great now. You don't got them demons no more. Your soul is healed. Now go and be everything I called you to be.
Right.
It's not for you to sit with me all the time. We are not crutches. Counselors and therapists are not crutches. I don't want you knowing me for 5 and 10 years.
Right.
I love you, but I want to see you flourish.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so it is with godly wisdom and counsel that we flourish. And so that's the goal of a Christian counsel. We look at all parts of who you are and we seek to advocate the healing journey for you.
Now you just
Yes.
you just used 2 terms and
Sure.
for the audience,
Yeah.
counselors and therapists. Can
Of
you
course
talk
you
about
got
the
that.
difference?
Yes, there is
Okay.
a difference. So a therapist is long term. A counselor is more short term. So if your goal is, what's the short term goal?
To build more confidence and
Yeah.
something.
So you would go,
it's like
you would go to a counselor for that. A therapist typically you be with for 2-3 years because it's either the injury is so deep, it's so much renewal that's needed. And like I said, there are people who have that, who don't have the support, because one of the main things for success is your support system. And so if you don't have that support system, a therapist de facto becomes that for you. And so you have to learn that relationship. And then you have to learn how to apply that relationship outside of the relationship. So it's just, and then you may need, new Medicaid. So it's just like, it's more layered. Counseling gives you the tools to immediately implement. And honestly, most people come to counseling and therapy in a crisis. More so, people are more comfortable with saying they're seeing a counselor than they are a therapist. And so it's funny because I'm like, I'm a Christian. I know I'm going to be a Christian therapist. I say, but when I come to the church, I say I'm a biblical counselor. Because the only way I can psychoeducate you or teach you the truth is for you to get some Bible in it. And I'm cool with that because that's how I live.
Right.
And so even when I introduced myself, I was just like, I'm a minister, I'm a biblical counselor, and I'm a mental health professional because I know us. And it's just like, ain't no wrong me.
Right.
And it's like, no, it's not wrong. It's just due to the fall of man, we all got stuff. And God's trying to redeem and restore us. And maybe you need just some extra support to do that.
Right. And somebody to help you weed through the stuff.
Yes.
Because
Right.
I'll just give you a personal situation that just happened to me. I went to Paris, came back from Paris, and I just hit this pit. And I remember just getting up one day and just like kind of looking around like, how in the world did I get here? It's almost what we talked about having the mountaintop and then valley experiences right after. It's like these two major things right back to back. And so I remember sitting there and not really wanting to call anybody, but knowing that I needed to call somebody. And so I called somebody who I knew had the spiritual prowess, and to understand, and who could intercede, because I understand that intercession was needed at the time. And I think a lot of times when you know that you need it, when you were talking about humility to admit that you need help, will save you from a lot of years or a lot of time being drug around and dealing or falling deeper into depression, because one of the enemy's tactics is isolation.
Absolutely.
If you Mama used to yell, you got to tell off on that devil, it was so good. She was, but Mama was very educated, but then she just knew. And so depending on what points in time you hear all us talk different than others, all of us sound like her, but in another way. But she would say, you got to tell off on that devil. See, he get off on the secret stuff. See, if you're going on out and tell it all, get ahead of the game. Get ahead of, whatever. But I know she was saying all of that to say that the enemy loses the grasp
Yes.
when you start to say and you start to pull in your reinforcements and you start to call people who have faith, you know, and then and for us as people who are being called on, because all of us are going to be called on and going to need to call at some point,
And I'll
right?
be honest with you. Before I even started this mental health journey, God was dealing with me about vulnerability. That is another major concept or aspect of mental health. If you don't divulge or disclose, we don't know. Now, the Holy Spirit can reveal, but the reality is we're going to wait for you.
Right.
Because this is your journey, and
Right.
we're respecting you, and we're working on your timeline. But the reality is humility with vulnerability. Because you're telling me and people come in with all kinds of stuff. So you're telling me your deepest, darkest, or most shameful thing
Right.
that you have. And it's just like, it's safe.
Yeah.
It's fine. Listen, I signed an informed consent, which means I ain't going to share this with nobody.
Right.
You're safe. And that is very important for a believer, because it's like, we're not going to judge you, first and foremost. And second of all, we can't ethically ask you if you're a believer or not. We'll lose our license. So you come in and tell us you're a believer, we're working on your terms. And so the reality is I'm a believer too, so it'll be make it a little, you know, easier for us to incorporate that into our interventions. But it is with that respect, it's with that vulnerability that we're very empathetic and we're very careful to hold very like as a treasure. And yeah, we're taught to do that extensively. And to make the person feel like even if the world is against you, you have your own little part of the world with us. And I think that's so important for anybody support.
That's good. That's good. And I wanted to ask you, or it was a statement. Wow, I lost my thought that quick. Okay. Well, that's all right, because we got 3 minutes left. But this is what I wanted to say. As believers, right? I think we have to work on too being people who people can trust to come to. You know what I'm saying? We got to do better at creating, and do better at creating an environment and a culture.
Being normal.
Yeah, you know, just where people are
kind.
human. Yes, and learning how to be that person that someone can call and say, hey, I'm having an issue. I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. And then you being a good ear. I think it's important too. Like I'll use our relationship as an example. One time you called me, I ain't gonna tell you what we talk about, but one time you called me and you were telling me about a specific issue. Danielle just did this to me the other day too. And I said, oh, it's because I said you kind of enjoying this a little bit. Because she's calling me all distressed. And she know what I'm talking about. Yeah. She's calling, and it's a thing. And the people. And I'm trying. And I want to be nice. And this and this. And I said, you're enjoying this. And she was like, I think you're right. Because I know you.
I needed that.
But she needed that truth.
Because
And because I'm like, I know
I was like,
moment.
you know what, you actually,
Yeah,
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, and I say so. You
not
know,
as bad.
you don't have to put on L's with me, okay? Because I know you like it, okay?
Right.
So now we got to deal with. I know you. And so having that person, having those people, that community that know you.
Yeah.
Well enough to be honest and say, okay, like Danielle did it to me the other day when I was like, Danielle, I'm nice. I do, because I was sitting there and she was just like, no, you keep blinking your eyes feverishly. And she said, no, because I know you.
Yeah.
So I know it is not as you're saying, or you're perceiving it one way.
Right.
And you may be honestly perceiving something one way, but I know you and I know your patterns. So, even praying for a community of people that can see you.
Yes.
And
Like
what
that.
I was going to say,
Absolutely.
even as you talk about the difference in the counseling therapist, I'm going to say this really fast, that's a good space for a counselor. as an objective person
Yes.
to help you see past what you think it may be, even if you don't have that circle.
Right.
Okay. So
All
I-
right, y'all. That is it for this episode of Salt Shaker Conversations. We will see you guys next week. We love you all. We on the side of the world having everyday conversations. I'm gonna get that tagline right. We'll see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.